Hey, nice to see everybody. We're going to just say a quick round of hellos. We don't need your thorough, complete introduction, but if you can give us your preferred name and then also just tell us one thing that you're thinking about when it comes to language revitalization. So I think Doug Juice wanted to go first.
Duck juice, Flowage, it's me, Duck juice. Um, I am really inspired by Leanne Hinton. Um, in one of the earlier readings, she made it clear that for us teachers that are just starting out, we don't have to know everything in the language. The very first class, all it took was for the teacher to know two commands besides the classroom phrases and the meeting and greeting and goodbye. Um, all she needed to know was two commands, uh, like an had kill, kausla, sit down, gasla, stand up. That's all she needed for the first day of class. But the really cool thing about it, well, there's multiple cool things. Um, it was there was no English spoken, so even though it was just two commands, it was a mini immersion, and the gestures made it clear what the student was to do, even if they didn't understand actual verbal command, they understood the gestures. And so they did this repeatedly until it was time to test out the students and see if they're catching it. So then they dropped the gestures and just did the commands. And this went on for a long time. And then she had the students um, start teaching each other until they went all the way around the classroom. And and then the next lesson, you add a phrase or two more, and you build on it and build on it, and pretty soon you have um, a full immersion setting. How?
Oh,
Uh-uh. Yeah, uh, well, first of all, hi, my name is Aiden, Chish, Shikat Yahan, Kuchenach Sai. Um, Something I've been thinking about today is, we do talk a lot about bringing the language into the school, into the home, but not so much the workplace. And I've been when I started this program, I worked construction, and there was no Tlingit being spoken on a roof. But this semester, I just had my first day at the NRSC, and to see an environment where students can work in the Native Rural Student Center, where people can work and their ways of life and their language is encouraged, that really lets your brain stay in that immersive environment. Even if you're having to help people in English and, do all the other things like the paperwork in English, you're still constantly thinking about native events. So uh, I've been really enjoying that switch and not worrying about two totally different things. So, sheesh.
hey, geez, thank you for sharing. That is everybody in the room. So let's cast the net out to the internet. So, what name you would prefer, and just one thought about language revitalization? Just something about language stuff you've been thinking about.
Uh, Good afternoon, Ish. Um, I think I said it in my first class that I was able to attend that I want to just figure out how to better support our initiatives, language. I've even talked to my executive team about just hiring some language folks, Tlingit, Hadkil, Shamalgik, and just make it available to staff a couple of days a week. And then maybe it supplements a student to be a teacher too. So I'd really like to hear some ideas from you folks on that. I just heard the gentleman before me talk about normalizing it in the workplace, and it's odd to me that it's not normalized in our workplace, which is the tribe. And so, I'd like to see us develop signage and everything in our languages. And so that's really what's on my mind. And also, I want to say to our teacher, I'm not here for a grade, as my attendance will attest to, but I just want to learn and figure out how to better implement language programs into the tribe, how to support these programs, and just how to be a language warrior to fight for these things. And sometimes I don't even think they have to be a fight. We just don't know, or we just haven't tried it. And so we're really wanting to do that. Felt inspired by our friend Yvonne Peter when he was here, was it last week or the week before, about what they're doing. And I want to see more of that. Geez, how
Wonderful.
Geez.
Keep it going, folks.
Good afternoon. Uvanga Atara Salaktuna. You can call me Salaktuna, my Inupiaq name, or you can call me Sandy. I rarely go by Sandra, but it's always what's on the screen. I suppose I could change that. What's been on my mind is this, the comment that Tukshake, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right, and you can correct me if I'm mispronouncing it. Mentioned in the first class that I attended that she is working in a low stress environment this year as she learns to become a language teacher. And I keep reflecting and going back to her comment about that, because I know that where I'm working right now and where I'm supporting language work, it's a pretty stressful environment. In our public school settings, you hire a language instructor, and if you're hiring at this time of year, it's already into the school year, and that's what's happening. And you're placing brand new employees who are language learners themselves in classrooms where they have to fully manage and teach students, and they don't even know some of the basics of pedagogy, lesson planning. They don't feel confident in the language. And that to me is just something we've got to address where I'm supporting this work. So I want to thank her for mentioning that at the first class, because that's my focus right now. So.
Koyana, thank you for sharing. Yeah, let's keep it going. I got some thoughts about education and just in general and why it's so stressful.
Winey, Hook Yunks, David Lang, either great, Dave or Hook Yunks, always great to hear. Something that I study Somalia, and something that I've been really inspired by just lately. In the last day or two, we heard today from our friend in Metlakatla who's working to implement language and culture in the grade schools directly influenced by the TCLL program, and reached out to our group, the Juno group, for some help with resources and putting together some things. And it's just it's great to see. It's great to see that circle of influence, and there's been language has come in and out of the Metlakatla school system, but I think it's always been sort of temporary programs, or the teachers get switched up quite a bit. I'm sure lots of politics involved that I don't know about, but it's great to see them looking to cement a program in place that will carry language and culture, like the TCLL program. And yeah, just seeing that influence reach out and hit the Tsimshian community in such a positive way is great. So I'm real happy about that.
Deutschen. I'm trying to use two screens at once, so if I have any typos over there, it's because I can't. It's far away. Okay, let's keep it going. This is fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. We got a few left.
Hansan, Yuchat Duasak. I've been, I was on a ferry and camping, so I read ahead knowing I'm getting ready for after school club. And so I agree, the Hinton has been really wonderful. What's been on my mind is a chapter, gosh, I have it right here, about the Sami and the success that they've had that was called This Work is Not for Pessimists, which I thought was really perfect as far as the work ahead of us. And there was one thing in particular that's been on my mind, and they quoted the Dauenhauers in it. And it was talking about ideological clarification and the idea that the Sami were very clear about why they were revitalizing the language, and there was a sense of anybody could learn it, and they were just very clear about how they wanted to go about it. And this quote, they said that the Dauenhauers, they speak of a lack of what they call a prior ideological clarification. And they said that they weren't able to reverse the language shift. There was a rise in cultural activities, symbolic language, but there were disagreements concerning how languages should be promoted and by whom. And so it made me think, like it said, there's some scattered revitalization efforts without holistic planning, and how do we all bring everybody together? And so I guess my question is, what is, for the community of Juneau, which is where I am, what is our ideological thrust? What is the purpose? And maybe by figuring that out and bringing a holistic approach, we could have everybody working together with a direction. Goodness, cheese.
Geez, thank you for sharing. Yes, conflicting sometimes, or sometimes just different language ideologies, and we'll talk about what that means and how to navigate it.
Can I go next?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. So my English name is Lyanna Wallace. I worked at Clinton Haida for a while, and we did a Think It word at every staff meeting, and that was a lot of fun. Came up with some good words, especially as they related to the subject. But the thing that I've been thinking about lately is the cognitive therapy. I think it's called cognitive behavioral therapy as it relates to silent speakers. In an earlier conversation, I mentioned that it would be really nice if so many households had the Tlingit language spoken in the home. And I reflect back on it, I wasn't the only one. There were a number of us my age that grew up with Tlingit speakers. And it just seems we're all silent. And I'm still very nervous. I'll just kind of splurt it out, but now at least I'm getting it out without feeling all kinds of tension. But I just would like to learn more about this cognitive therapy and how it relates to releasing that silent voice. So I've been thinking about that. Thank you. Finish, Chish.
Yeah. Sheesh. Wonderful. Yeah, I think Pilo Wilson said a lot of language revitalization is overcoming the psychology of use. And we're going to look at that throughout this semester. Let's keep it. I think we have a few more.
I can go, I guess. I mean, I think about this all the time, but like, what are the things something that's on my brain a lot is like, what are the things that we could do that would like actually move the needle, like get us toward the place we want to go, right? Because, if we're being real, a lot of the programs that we have done or are doing aren't going to make speakers, right? Or if they are making speakers, they're doing it very, very slowly. Or they're teaching about the language and not like using the language. So there's no answer in that, and it's not to be down on anyone, but like we do need to think about like what is it actually going to move the needle.
Sheesh. Yes, we'll talk about this. But who's left? We got to hear from everybody.
I can go next. Godam Tiban Devayu Ligi Victoria McCoy. My Tsimshian name is Godam Tiban. It translates to Heart of a Sea Lion. My son's home with me, so you're going to hear chips and everything in a second. The thing that I've been thinking about, I've been working on a project with Simplodum Newsome, Dr. D'Angeli this summer. I got to work as her apprentice, and she hooked up with Kitsum Kalem Head Start in our traditional territories. YM in Canada. And we've been doing immersion sessions with the Head Start teachers in Kitsum Kalem. And we call in maybe twice a week, once or twice a week, and we'll go over songs and commands with the teachers. And most of the teachers are not Indigenous at the immersion, but they're able to pick up on the Shemalia words and the songs, the commands that we teach them. So I'm really happy to be a part of that project. Another thing I've been thinking about is our L1 and our L2 speakers. And we have a lot of children that are growing up with Shemalia as their first language. And I'm wondering, are they counted as L1 speakers if their primary language is Shemalia? I know parents have a lot of work to do on keeping up the Shemalia, but the children are born into it like our grandparents were. So I had questions about that. That's what's been on my mind. Lugo and Deutschem.
Wow, Deutschem. Yes, and so we had this conversation in Hawaii sometimes. I said, are these L1 speakers? Are these native speakers of Hawaiian? Are they birth speakers? And they said, yeah, we think so. And so yeah, getting back to that, but then also there's several conversations to be had about folks who can understand the language but have a hard time speaking it, especially those who grew up around it, and could certainly tell you if you're not saying it correctly, but for some reason have a number of barriers to speaking. Great thoughts. All right, we have 5 left.
I'll go. Kachtzin, Achsai. So something I think about all the time is like I know it's important to create speakers. Like that's the main goal, is to make speakers. And something I also always think about is how to create speakers while doing something rather than just a class where it's kind of repetitive, but like making a dugout. I think there's so many avenues of our language that'll open up if we had those kind of things, like a club. I really want to try to start a club here at UAS where it's building little model dugouts, and that would all be in the language. It would be different than students here, in the class who aren't taking Tlingit or don't know any Tlingit. A club, that's all you'd be learning. So much more, I think. And yeah, just there's so many speakers out there who are carvers. Like, I don't want to name any of them, but we know who they are. They're born speaking Tlingit, they carve, and they're not in classes like this. They're not meeting with like our cohort. We haven't met with fluent speakers in a long time. And there's like the other cohorts are pretty lucky and fortunate, I think, to have that. And I think we just need a lot more contact with them and engagement with them.
Yeah. Geesh. And so getting, Barbara Meek said 20 years ago, the language was in the home and not in the classroom. Now it's in the classroom, not in the home. And this was very telling to me when we had an immersion in Sitka, and it was Southeast people with Tlingit peoples, and brought a bunch of fish, and we went outside to cut the fish, and we couldn't cut the fish in Tlingit. We had to switch to English, and that was so. Yeah, we'll talk a lot this semester too about the idea of task-based language learning. And so regardless of what we're doing, like this is something I'm consciously trying to do is get back to how do we look at these things and then have the practical uses of them as well, and then to get the language out on the land, and to, you know, whether we're talking about camping trips or just other stuff, like time is always, I think capitalism teaches us that time is so short that you don't have time for anything. But I think we've got to reject some of those notions and start to do a bit more. And we'll talk about some ideas and tools that might exist that we can utilize to try and pull folks together. Because we also have folks who are in all different places, but that doesn't mean you have to always have everybody at everything. There's got to be a whole bunch of different things, and then those things can be a model for something that can happen somewhere else. Okay, 4 left maybe.
I could go. Sawidrin, Sandra Hinadikyang. My name is Sandra. I don't know. I have a lot on my mind. I think if it's language related, I'm just kind of frustrated right now with the whole COVID policies and all the COVID world, I guess. So devoting my whole life in the past years to the language, and then being told because I don't want to get a shot from a government and do take that I can't be in any programs any longer. So that's what's on my mind right now.
Yeah, those are also tough conversations. Is like, how do we keep the folks going? And COVID has thrown everything for a loop. And I haven't sat in a room with people and just spoke and been with elders and stuff like we used to. But also, yeah, so the vaccination question it's a big question, because it's does create an unsafe environment if not everybody is vaccinated. But not everybody has to. But then we have to sort of look at what is the group going to do, which is a big conversation. So yeah, how all for sharing your thoughts.
Stay strong.
Okay, so let's keep it going. I think we got 3 left.
I'll go. My name's Heather, and what I've been thinking about is normalizing teaching of language and early literacy in schools, in public schools, because I prepare teachers, and I see pockets of things that are going on, like what Lori is doing. I see some amazing culturally responsive emergent literacy practices that combine teaching can get with the emergent literacy sight words in English. So it's like a dual language learning program in elementary school. And I just think that more teachers need to be aware of it. And the fact that the Hinton readings I'm going to use for my pre and in-service teachers to kind of alleviate some anxiety about you don't have to be perfect. You just have to try, and you can learn this. So you start out with baby steps and you learn to take bigger steps. So thank you. Ganesh Chish.
Thank you. Anybody not go yet? Maybe 1, maybe 2?
Tla region, Tukshak A Hinudik Yang. My name is Tukshak A. And I guess what's been on my mind lately is kind of along the lines of what Sani said, which is how do we get people to speak? And as a super shy person myself, it's been kind of tough for me to go into spaces where I don't feel confident. But my summer internship through this language program was all about creating curriculum to empower K through 12 students through science and through their heritage language. And I think I really want to focus my efforts on creating curriculum where students feel like they are represented through their through what they're learning in their classrooms, and whatever that may look like. So how
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And yes, the willingness to communicate is, we're going to keep coming back to that as well, because in particular, if you have folks who are shy, it's not going to be effective to point at them and say, speak. And, and then sometimes moving into these environments where there's lots of pressure already, and then sort of trying to keep folks going. Yeah. Is that everybody? Maybe one left? Okay. Well, let's start by talking about the process of this class and the work that we have to do, which is outlined in the syllabus, which we should probably go over and sometimes revisit, and also just clarify things, make sure we're all okay. I'll just continue to say we're not in any big hurry to do anything. Primarily, what we're here to do is to read the thoughts of some folks who do a lot of work in language revitalization, then to have some conversations about it. Then we're also going to break off into some groups, which was supposed to start today, but it's not going to. We'll just push it back a week. But basically, we'll divide into teams of, I think 3 is a good number. Go out, find some things, and come back and share those thoughts. So we'll get to that, but so going through the syllabus, I put these 4 kind of quotes in there, and I'd like to read them, and then maybe if we can talk about them a little bit, then we'll start leaning towards a conversation about what our work is for this class, what's expected of us, just so that we're clear, and then also just sort of looking at making sure that we're able to stay on schedule with our readings and the conversations we're going to have with those readings, any presentations we might need to make, and any work that we need to do. Then we have 2 additional articles that we've read about organizations and Indigenous language programs, and then also higher education. Now I've got a whole series of thoughts, and we're going to run out of time before I sort of get to all the thoughts. But so just thinking, Joshua Fishman wrote a series of books and probably was one of the leaders of what I would call sociolinguistics, and just developing it as a field, which is just sort of saying linguistics is a very large field which looks at the scientific analysis of languages, basically. It does a lot more than that, but that's maybe a pretty good starting point. But sociolinguistics says we want to look at what changes need to be made to bring languages back to use that are falling out of use. And so for Fishman, it was Hebrew. And there was a whole community of folks that were working in Hebrew. So I'll just read this. In one of his texts, he wrote, "Even the much vaunted no-language policy of many democracies is, in reality, an anti-minority languages policy because it delegitimizes such languages by studiously ignoring them and thereby not allowing them to be placed on the agenda of supportable general values." Anybody got any thoughts, reactions to that statement? I thought it'd be good to sort of put in there because a lot of education in general is an English-only medium in Alaska. It's an English-only medium in America. That's the sort of default state of education. And you can have alternative programs. So you can have programs that are, there are German immersion schools and Japanese immersion schools and medium schools and the like. There are very few Indigenous language medium programs. And then there are certainly instances
Here's
where,
what I found.
I don't know, where the Indigenous language is not considered the official language of whatever's going on, whether this is a city hall meeting, whether it's a school board meeting, whether it's a business. And so it's good to sort of think of a quote like this that basically saying the default is anti-Indigenous language atmospheres. Because we are going to have to shift the atmospheres in order to create space for languages. Your ideas if you got them. We're going to look at the next one. Let me keep the chat open. Yes, that's right. Okay. From Pedagogy of the Oppressed suffer from the duality which has established itself in their innermost being. They discover that without freedom they cannot exist authentically. Yet, although they desire authentic existence, they fear it. They are at one and the same time themselves and the oppressor whose consciousness they have internalized. Any thoughts on that statement?
I love this book.
Yes.
It was, yeah, it was a foundation for El Sistema work, and there were a lot of ahas, like, you know, that children and people are not vessels to push things in, that they, you know, that's why I love King Gesti's Hatu Yeyiti, you know, it's already within us, and that education is about drawing out what is already there. And I also found the idea of this relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor, and that there's, I don't know if I can, how I can speak to that, but it's a relationship that has to change, and yet both roles have been accustomed to it. And so how do we break that, and that education through looking at your community and who you are and your identity and creating the curriculum from that, is that emancipation or that freedom that needs to happen. So, yeah, anyway, he says it so much better, but it really is a powerful book.
Right. And I included this because I think if we're really talking about language revitalization and stabilization, you're talking about decolonizing institutions and decolonizing individuals. And I think that requires conversations about some of these feelings that we can't do it, we shouldn't do it, we have to wait. So many different things that I think emerge in the consciousness of individuals and collectives that get us just not do the thing. Like we know the thing. But basically the thing is this when it comes to languages. If people speak it and live within live with the languages, then they're just fine. But then people don't on such a large level that it gets very hard to create this. We're talking about a fairly cosmic shift to move back. If fewer than 1% of a population speaks a language, then you have to make some conscious moves to get folks to get to 5%, to get to 10%, and to do so in ways that doesn't make folks feel like they're not part of the thing, or that, you know, there's so many people who are probably going to say, I wish I had done this, if only I had. And so the other sort of thing that creeps into people's mind is that it's too late now. Like if only, so there's a few different patterns that I see doing this type of work, which is language revitalization. And one is it's too late. Like it's too late for me. I guess the next generation will do it, and I missed out. It sucks. I think one of the other things is if only this thing, if only we had this type of room, if only we had, if Zoom only worked, you know. I used to carry this comic around, and it was like the art of procrastination, and it was like, you know, denial. It's like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do it tomorrow. And then sort of like reality starts to set in, and then displacement. And so, you know, the little character's like, if only this damn stapler worked, I could get this project in. And then sort of acceptance. and just sort of being conscious of all of those things at a very large level, because we're talking about uh, decolonization, and then we're also talking bringing our languages back. And I know in the chat several times, lateral violence has been brought up, and also other things that are absolute realities. And then how do you get to a point where those things, where we'll say, oh yeah, you remember when that stuff kind of stopped us for a while? That was kind of silly, but now here we go. Let's take a look at a couple more. Share your thoughts if you got them. Share them in the chat. Feel free to talk. Duck Juice.
Yeah, what you were talking about just now reminds me of a speaker that in my hometown that it's almost like lateral violence. Like he's qualified to do these things that he thinks other people should do. Like why aren't there books on prayers, and why aren't there books on songs, and so I hear it repeatedly. I think the next time I hear it, I'm going to say, well, you know, you're qualified. Perhaps it's something that you could do, and you know, mention it in a nice way. But yeah, I think it's kind of odd. It's almost it's a it's a negative it's a negative outlook on the language. Why isn't this being done? Like earlier when you're talking about, oh, I'm going to leave it for the next generation. My time has passed, and oh, if only this worked, or if only that worked. And and the reality is, some of these people that are saying this are actually qualified to help with the workload. There's not many of us. We need all the help we could get, but what we don't need is more. Well, it's not really lateral violence, but it's definitely a negative thing. I don't know what you would call it. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, because yeah, sometimes it's no matter what we want to call it, sometimes it's us stopping ourselves, right? And so sometimes someone will just have like I think we should be open to improvement and analysis and have a process for continuing to improve the language program, whether it's talking about curriculum or the classroom or the institution, whatever the thing we're trying to improve, the instructor and individual's fluency levels. But I'm always conscious of when I hear empty criticism. Like, for example, Doug Juice put something out there, and I would say, oh, there's errors in that. But then if Doug Juice says, oh, can you show me where the errors are so I could fix them? And I never respond. Or if Doug Juice says, well, can you tell me how to say it correctly? And I just don't respond. And that is something I see as far as a pattern, which I think is sometimes destructive because sometimes it just comes off, whether it's deliberate or not, as don't use it. Because we just tell each other, don't use it. And I see a hand up, so Chachi, I'll get to you in 1 second. The only time I've ever been told to not speak one of my indigenous languages is by a fellow indigenous person. It was only the Tlingit people who told me to stop speaking Tlingit, and that stands out to me. Chachi Ish.
Yeah, this is an area I really struggle with because I've really seen the kind of the lateral violence, and I chalk it up to being, you know, the success of assimilation and indoctrination, right, of colonization. But you know, our own organizations, you would not believe how much a struggle is just to suggest that we do language or suggests that we indigenize our tribes. And a lot of people, when I became president and I said we need to indigenize the tribe, people took it as me saying they weren't indigenous enough already, or that I was attacking them. That's not what I was saying at all. And I remember somebody said, well, what do you want us to do, wear our vests to work and hoo-ha? And I tried not to, I didn't want to get offended by that, but I was like, no, it's bringing our languages in here, that reflecting our inherent tribal values. That's what I mean by indigenizing. But it, and then I've kind of peripherally been around and supporting all these language groups, and I've almost pulled back and given up myself because of the toxicity towards each other. So that's why I keep going back to the lateral violence, because I got to give a lot of credit to the Juneau Shamalgit group, because they really come together in such a spirit of just gathering and family and support and holding each other up, that I'm like, how do we replicate this for everybody else? And I've thought long and hard. I'm not from Juneau, I'm from the village. And what I realized that I yearn for, because I feel displaced here, is that kind of just being around my own people. And when I say my own people, I kind of mean the Tlinkits and Haidas from Prince of Wales. And so I think for the Shamalgit who feel, the Simpsons that feel displaced, they're really just looking past any of the things that could focus on the negative, and they're just so happy to celebrate each other and hold each other up. And I just love that, and I want to see that across the board, and I want to see it in the tribal government. I want to see our institutions. What sets us apart from anybody else? It's our culture. It's who we are. It's not a race thing. It's a sovereignty issue, and I think our language is our sovereignty. So that's what I'm struggling with. But I feel rather beat down, or even just weathered from watching others be beat down by each other. It's not the non-native community that they're kind of put up as this enemy at times as to what we're doing, but it's really our own people to each other, I think, is one of the biggest barriers.
And yeah, and I saw in the chat as well, another thing that tends to happen is the focus goes to one individual or like a little set of individuals. And so what we're trying to do is build lasting, large programs so that there's lots of people who can do things. But then it comes back for me to a question of like, what things should we do? So if you have limited resources, you can't spend your time proofreading someone's book that has a little bit of the indigenous language in there when you might have some bigger things to accomplish. However, it could be a big thing. And so making sure that the workload is distributed and we're not looking at individuals, but then we're also sort of looking at the concept of, for me, a lot of it comes down to what I call hegemony, which is you had very active genocide against Native American peoples at physical level, at an emotional level, spiritual level, linguistic level, at all levels. And then you don't have to actively do that anymore, because now there's a culture that's been established where people will do what they feel like is the correct thing to do, which when it comes to Native Americans is to vanish, right? Is to just lose your language, is to not use it. And so I started to notice this in a whole variety of ways. So sometimes people would come from outside of our community, they're non-Indigenous, and they'd hear us say, okay, we need to speak the language to each other everywhere. Then we'd see that person in the grocery store and they would speak the language to us, and we would feel very uncomfortable, like we weren't supposed to do that. And so there's some things like that, but then also when you see somebody doing the thing as well, getting angry at them, but sometimes that's because it's feeling a complex series of emotions about you wanting yourself to be doing the thing, but then also feeling like you can't do the thing. It's very complicated and tangled. And I think it's also a combination of the hegemony, modernity, we talked about a little bit, and then also I think romanticism, which is uh, where it's sort of the dominant, where I guess I don't want to say dominant, where the established white culture that is a big part of America likes to take us some kind of narrative and turn it into one person who's saving the language, and they just those types of narratives are really what folks want to sometimes put out there, and we have to push back against some of those things. I think in Hawaii they did a lot of that by always working in teams and just sort of if someone wants to interview someone, you say, okay, well, you got to interview two of us. And then you could also start engaging in some other things. Say, okay, you always come to a male, so we gotta have a female here as well. And so there's a number of different things that can be done. Um, Wonderful stuff. Okay, let's look at a couple more, and then we'll keep talking. Oh, yeah, Coach Shane.
Sheesh. Something I try and think about if I feel like we're in a situation where our peers or people teaching and learning the language with us maybe have that attitude. Um, I just try and remember that this is a language that they did try to take from us. They violently and just over time methodically tried to take our language from us. So it only makes sense that over time and from our ancestors we do have that feeling of defense. We know that we have something that was attacked, and so if we come in and we start learning it and we're hiding it from everyone, we can't teach it that way. But it's also important to remember that it's kind of natural, I feel like, to be defensive of like we were saying, there isn't much time in the daily life to speak and learn Tlingit, and so if all of a sudden we feel like people are saying we aren't working hard enough as being native, maybe that's what some people feel when we're bringing up these conversations. So I really try and look at it like that. Folks that just have a different lifestyle, but we also gotta defend our language, and we definitely gotta hold it up and share it too. But it's chief.
Sheesh. Fabulous. So here's another one. Dr. William Wilson, I call him Pila all the time. One of the main things a language program must do is to overcome the psychology of use. I think about this one all the time. If I can just get people to talk in the language, I would feel so much better at doing my job. But it's a really hard thing to do. And I've heard lots of different things. I've heard of people, they start sweating when they start just thinking about using the language. There's some people who say, like, I feel like my throat is closing. I feel like, it's just sort of like, but getting past this idea that I think that the language has to be perfect, and also some of these ideas that, because if the language is used less and less and less and in fewer and fewer places, one of the things that we have to do is to normalize it happening. If I go somewhere, I might hear the language, I might use the language. And this happens less and less, just because 10 years ago I could go a whole bunch of places here in Juneau and find people to talk to. I could talk to that person, I could talk to that person. They know the language, I could talk to them. And then that happens less and less. And what happens, I think, is the language loses so many realms that the only time the language comes out is during cultural ceremonies. So then every act of language use feels like a ceremony, and then it's so sacred and it's so untouchable that it becomes hard to just do day-to-day stuff. So this concept is called the vernacular. Like, what do people like to talk about? And now let's give them the tools to use our own languages to talk about that stuff. So is it the regional basketball games? Is it traveling to different communities? Is it, if we want to have the vaccination, non-vaccination argument, can we do that in our languages? Can we do a bunch of this stuff? And then also, can we talk about who should be governor? Can we do that in our languages? I was reading this task-based language thing, and it says, set up this scenario. Two people have a dialogue. One person asks for help. The other person gives a reason why they would like to, but they can't right now. And then the first person talks them into helping them. And it's just sort of a scenario. And could you write up that scenario? And so the language of daily use, I think, is a really important task. But then there has to be a community that's committed to doing that and can do it in a way that feels inviting, that gets people to think this is the thing you should be doing and that you can do, and that it's welcoming, and it's because I think it is easy sometimes to create these groups where some people are in, some people are out, and then to shame people into coming in. A bunch of that stuff can sort of occur. The psychology of use, we'll talk about that quite a bit. Anybody got any thoughts?
I was listening to John Martin, and he says we have to not be so uptight. And he was talking about the song that he was singing to Carolyn, my dad's niece. And it was a love song, and he was really building us all up that he was going to sing this song in Tlingit. And then he turns around and he sings it in English, and it was, it made Carolyn laugh, and I fondly remember all the people that I used to listen to laughing, telling stories, and they'd be sitting in the back of the room and they would be giggling. And it would be nice to, add some humor and just let it be. It's okay. It's okay to be funny in our learning process. I know there are times when we need to learn all the different levels of communication, the importance of riddles and the stories about in the beginning and things that are sacred. But as we're in this learning process, just letting go and having fun. Just wanted to share that.
Sheesh.
I wanted to share one of the things that we do. We have immersion sessions Monday and Wednesday, the Shamalia cohort with Shagop Alfie Price, and he picks a topic, or we can talk about a topic that we want to. Like today I talked about, I went to the doctor and my new medicine and my INR level was too low, but I was able to do it all in Shamalia. But then he told me his story because he was on the same medication, and we were speaking in the language the entire time. So I think just finding a safe place where you can share your daily activities and not be judged. I think that's a start of speaking the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I had a bunch of conversations with someone who I feel comfortable speaking Tlingit with about like how rare it is to find someone who you just like feel comfortable talking to. And for me, what it is like with some folks, I really can feel my language use being analyzed when I'm talking to them, and it feels unsafe to me.
Yeah. When I was, I did a dissertation in Hawaii, and one of the hardest questions that they asked me over there was, what advice would you give us? I said, oh, you guys are doing everything. You built the schools, you got 10,000 speakers, but I guess I would ask you to have environments where you don't correct anybody. Because I was at one of your morning ceremony, which a cultural ceremony, like, blowing the conch shell and singing the songs and doing the chants. And I could hear the teachers correcting the students, and I could see on their face that it hurt their feelings. And so, yeah, to be in a place where we're not correcting each other sometimes, and actually just saying, you know what, self correction goes a long ways. Once you start using it a lot, Okay, I think a teacher can listen to students and then develop lessons based on what they're hearing without having to stop anybody from talking. But that's something that I myself have to always just keep thinking about. But then, yeah, having safe spaces, which is could be physical spaces, could be sort of like, especially as we go towards Zoom, it could be sort of these types of spaces. But then also, who's in there? Uh, because I've heard some people say, yeah, I like to talk, but not when that person's here. And I've heard people say, well, I was going to introduce myself, but Kone is here, and I don't want him to think I'm doing it wrong. And so trying to sort of contrast some of those narratives as well so that we can start saying, what do we do? And I think also language programs sometimes lend themselves towards competitive atmospheres. And I think sometimes that's not helpful. Like who's the best and who's going to get it all correct and who's going to do these big fancy things. Good points. Last one on the series. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, going off of what Godam Keevan was saying earlier, in those cohort meetings too, those two are way ahead of me in how they're able to express themselves. So it's a pleasure to sit and learn and follow what I can and everything else. But also when it's my turn, it's stumbling, childish expression with lots of Simglish mixed in there to get the point across. But it's always, I'm never being corrected and celebrated for what I'm able to express. And later on, I learn or possibly self-correct in the moment, but learn later that instead of saying and expressing myself to cobble together vocabulary, saying to open my eyes, that there's a specific word for that, and finding those uses later on, but knowing that I'm understood in how I'm putting it together, and just encouraged to do so and to make those mistakes is a really, it really does help make a comfortable learning environment. And just it's great. So.
Yeah. If you have a language of use, I think you have an environment where people can find their own blank spots. Yeah, and I think if you cannot create that area, that atmosphere of use, then I think people tend to not find, because we can just speak English and talk about all this other stuff. And so it just, some of the things that I see is one is it'll shift over to English so we can make sure we're culturally doing things the appropriate way. Now, I'm not saying we should just do things any old way, but I've been to several immersion gatherings where it just launched into this big discussion on clans and histories and what protocols and who should be talking, but it's all in English. And I still think there's so many like little poison pills that colonialism does. Like one example would be someone told me if somebody dies in the clan, the whole clan is not supposed to dance for a year. And I said, that cannot possibly be the case. Because some clans are so big that somebody dies every year. And I'm not trying to say it's not a big deal when people die. But I think it was the individuals very close to them who could make a decision to mourn and to actively carry out their mourning rituals the way they wanted to. But it could not have possibly been the entire clan takes a year off from dancing when a single clan member dies in their clan. I said, for me, that sounds like something that's either been misinterpreted or that was given to us as an idea of what to do. So we would keep from doing our cultural things. Which gets us to the last quote. And feel free to chime in if you have other ideas.
I just wanted to say
go ahead.
something about corrections and making mistakes. And I think you touched on where I was headed with my comment here just a little bit there, Kone. I've been a part of some language immersion experiences where I'm working with people who are on the same level as I am in terms of learning. And if you know anything about Inupiaq endings, it's complex and you can get lost in the myriad of endings. And if you're pretty new to it, your comfort level is pretty low. But I was in a language, it was the Elisa Katibut group, and we were just spending a weekend doing endings. And as far as corrections from this group, because we were at a like level and we had spent a significant amount of our first day creating that space you're talking about for use, we comfortably took corrections from each other as peers because for each one of us, it was like we were just turning the dial just a little bit more for one another and for ourselves. And as we are talking with each other and using the endings and self-correcting or catching our partner and helping them move in the right direction, it was one of the times where I felt comfortable in an environment of mistaken corrections. But we had spent a significant amount of time creating that space, and we were also making sure we were working with partners who are at a similar level so that we could work with one another more like, I would say more like children in a classroom. But I just wanted to make that point that I think there is a space for corrections when it's good for the learner.
Yeah.
It has to actually be good for the learner.
Absolutely. And so I think a lot of times coming down to there's two concepts that I've heard pretty regularly that I think are pretty dangerous. And one is if you can't say it right, don't say it at all. I think that is a language killing philosophy. And sort of like, well, you don't say that to babies. Like, baby, if you can't say that right, you don't say it at all. You get no food tonight, right? But sort of, if we can sort of do away with that idea, but I think it's linked to this other that we're going to ruin the language, that we're going to break it, we're going to inherit this language, and then we're going to ruin it and give it to the next generation as a ruined thing. And I think that's another very, very dangerous concept. I think we have to figure out how do we develop high fluency and how do we make sure that we're tracking what the common errors are and how to take care of them. But if we can laugh about stuff and have fun without feeling like we're being laughed at, I was in a class the other night and we were trying to figure out this, I was trying to just get some folks to interpret something for us. And they're like, is that for cooking? I was like, well, no, because we don't cook our friends. And so if we cook our friends, then we have to go to jail. But just trying to keep it light and keep it fun. And then we could kind of laugh. And then someone else said, oh, is that to sniff? I was like, no, because we're not, we could sniff our friends, but we're not going to sniff our friends in this occasion. But just to sort of keep it fun and light and just say, let's keep going. We're so close. Look at the picture. And because another thing that sometimes happens is sometimes the teacher gets a little frustrated and is like, oh, they're not getting it at all. But then to always just create these safe environments to say, just try it, just see what happens. And then we got the answers here. And this does include the teacher teaching things incorrectly because they don't understand them. If you're in any sort of language program where you don't have very many speakers, odds are you're learning something on Monday, you're teaching it on Wednesday. And that's a dangerous fly by the seat of your pants type of thing, but sometimes that's the reality. And then maybe 5 years from now, it's not like that anymore, but someone's going to have to go down that path. And that means it's going to have to be a supportive environment for everybody and say, oh, well, now we know we've been saying it this way. Now we got to switch it to this other way, which can be frustrating. But I think the language community has to have its own sense of sovereignty to say, we give ourselves that room to grow within this thing because it's coming back from a very an endangered state. So thank you all, and thank you guys for sharing. I think it takes a lot of courage to engage in these conversations. I do think that there's another side that gets you to this other place and collectively collaborating and coming up with ideas on how to, like when we look at this class, it's called Foundations of Indigenous Language Education, because you have to figure out what that foundation is and you have to build upon it. So it's something that lasts and it's something that gets so much momentum that these little things won't be able to stop it anymore. And that brings us to Margaret Nori, an Ojibwe, scholar. Anishinaabe's is the name of the language. And she says, ultimately, saving a language that is endangered as a result of racism is in fact a battle with racism itself. Families and communities can come together or disassemble as a result of making a commitment to face and change racism. So again, heavy sort of thing. I kind of picked these 4 quotes just to sort of put in the syllabus and have, these are sort of things I think that will run through the length of the semester as we talk about this stuff, because sometimes we are going to talk about some of these things, and sometimes it's going to get sensitive. But then we have allies who are learning the language with us and doing wonderful things. And so sometimes we say we need to have some of these conversations about structural racism and how it affects our language learning and spaces. But then we also have to just say, okay, we can't stay in that conversation the whole time because it's going to likely be all in English. But we do have to realize that we're doing anti-racism work. Okay.
Can I add something to this?
Yes, please do.
Self-care is so important. And I know from time to time we all face a battle. And whether it's racism from within the family, the organization, or whatever, you know, self-care is so important. There's this great uncle of mine. His name is Nahu, and he would do things with his hands. And I won't go into all the things he does with his hands, but when we're getting ready or we hear this, even in our gatherings, we raise our hands when their songs are coming for the grief and to hold it away. And, you know, when we hear something, we walk away with it, you have to wipe it off of you. You know, you remove these things, you shake your hands. These are just little ceremonial things that you do. And I know these things were part of that taboo a long time ago with healers, medicine people, shamans. They would say all kinds of things about it, but self-care was something that went along with that. And you know, when we run into this, we have to teach one another and hold one another up and remember those things because it is hard. And if you're not careful, it will tear up the family and the community and in this case and programs.
Yeah, the stress is real, and also sometimes there's so much on the line too that I think that's why there's a lot of missteps in terms of fighting with each other instead of, you know, I would tease sometimes because I found this phrase, I got an elder to say, fight for your language, and, you know, and then I would just say, no, notice this doesn't say fight with each other. And, you know, I would just sort of tease about some of that stuff. But also, we might not realize that we've done something that makes somebody want to quit. And we might not realize that somebody's getting tired. And we might not realize that somebody's just, they start to give up. And what do we do with that? And what do we do in self-care and group care? These are big things. I remember I went to this conference in Hawaii, and then they got us, like, seriously, we all had these traditional, like, Hawaiian massages, and it was, like, very relaxing and empowering. We're all in a room, so we're doing this stuff together. But I thought, wow, they wrote self-care right into this activity. And how do we do that? What does our self-care look like? So we are getting together a bit more, especially if we can ever get past this pandemic, which is very challenging for a large group of people. But if we can, then we can start getting together more. But what does that self-care look like? And what does it look like in our language? And what does it look like as one another? Uh, as far as the process, we only got about 10 minutes left, so we're going to switch gears here. I'm going to give you a task to do over the weekend, okay? What I would like you to do, however you would like to do it, but don't spend a million hours on this. Map out all the organizations that are connected to your language, however you want to do it. And maybe there's lots of them, but I would like you to do that, to take a picture of it somehow, scan it, whatever you want to do. If you want to do it in some sort of fancy program, go ahead. But I would like you to create a visual map of the organizations that are linked to the language or languages that you are working in, and to share it with the group on Monday. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to take a look at some other software that sort of helps us with visual mapping. And we're going to talk about like what is it and what should it be? That's a lot of the conversations that I would like us to have this semester. What is it? What should it be? How do we get it there? Those are really the conversations I'm hoping we'll have. So that's your task over the weekend. Accessing the class readings can be done through the syllabus on this Google folder right here. This is on Blackboard, classes.alaska.edu. Log in with your UA credentials. You'll see your classes. This class is on there. If you need anything, send me an email. I'm happy to send you this link. If you can't find the readings, let me know. But basically, if you click on this link, you should end up with something that looks like this, where you've got week 2, week 3, week 4. We are in week 3. So our readings were the role of organizations and higher education. So those 2 readings in the Hinton book. We'll talk about that book a little bit on Monday. We'll talk more specifically about these readings and what we're getting to. So that means not just these week 3 ones, but you also got week 4. So there's a couple more, right? So ideally, you're reading those before the Monday class, even though there was no class on Monday this week. And then you're coming in ready to have a discussion based on those particular readings. The readings are important because they just help us to build this foundation and to engage in these types of conversations we're having. In addition, throughout the semester on Wednesdays, it's supposed to be every other Wednesday, I'm gonna adjust the calendar a little bit. I'll update the syllabus and I'll put the updated version on our class, our Blackboard page. And if you need a copy of the syllabus emailed to you, let me know. I'll be happy to send it to you. We're going to take a look at these methodologies, TPR, TPRS, where your keys, accelerated second language acquisition, the Paul Creek method, communication and language program, mentor-apprentice program, adult immersion, dual language education, language medium education. But the way we're going to do this is we're going to have 3 people who are our scouts. They are going to go out there and see what they could find about this stuff. You should be, if it's your turn, you should be looking at, I would say, somewhere around 10 hours of research and coordination putting a presentation together. What that presentation looks like is up to you. If you want to do some sort of slideshow and walk us through it, great. You want to give us some links to some things, great. But when we hear from you, we should hear, what is this thing? What is it used for? And how might it benefit us? Those are the things I'm really looking for. And then we'll have a discussion about it, right? So if you see it on there as well, go see what you could find about it so that we can have a conversation. The idea is we're going to take turns leading the discussion. And whoever the leader is, they're going to go find a few things out about this stuff to come and tell us. But don't make it a whole bunch of silence when your peers are going to go do something, right? Let's see. We'll also talk a little bit next week about what our midterm and finals will look like. I don't want you to stress about it, but I do want to sort of talk about it so you can start thinking about the work that's going to be needed to go into that. That is the graded part of this class, but I also want it to be a useful exercise. So going through, there are some important things in the syllabus that you should know. If you ever experience discrimination at the university, there are paths for you to take. Feel free to reach out to me or I can put you in contact with others if it comes to facing any form of discrimination at the university. We want to make sure that this is not a place where discrimination happens. Similar, if you have any sort of things that are going to impede your learning or impact your learning that have to do with special circumstances or any type of disability, please know that there are resources available for you. These do include counseling. These do include getting some extra time for assignments if that is needed, tutoring. There's lots of things that are available to you that you already pay for as a student. Title IX is really anti-sexual assault, anti-harassment, and anti-rape legislation. So to keep people safe, which could include being in a relationship where you experience some form of violence, if you were to somehow, like even if we were in some closed door meeting and you're sharing your life and what's going on, and somehow it comes to my attention that there is some form of abuse or harassment going on in a personal relationship, I am obligated to report that to make sure that it does not impact you as a student. And it's very important to state, do not harass people, do not engage in sexual or relationship violence, because those things need to be eliminated from society. There are resources here, though, if you do need any assistance, and there is the schedule. So this is going to be moved down to next Wednesday. I also noticed that where your keys was on the syllabus twice, so we're totally fine. So what I'm going to do, where was it? Right here. So this one will move here. Whoops. I think Paul Creek method moves down here. So I made a mistake on the syllabus, but it turns out it was a mistake we needed. So this will give us some time to figure out, so the group who goes, I think 3 folks signed up for TPR. What we'll do on Monday is we'll take a look at a spreadsheet and everybody will have a chance to sign up for at least one spot, maybe twice. And then we'll talk about what your presentation should look like. We will also be looking at the readings we did for this week. So this is week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. So when you read this syllabus, this class schedule, this corresponds to the Google folder. Read the things for week 4 for next week. Any questions about any of that? Duck Juice.
I can't remember what I signed up for. Can we see the sign sheet?
I didn't do one. I think I wrote it in a notebook somewhere. Who signed up for TPR? Anybody remember?
I thought I did, but I could be wrong.
Duck Juice.
Knew you.
I did.
Okay. So Godum Tibum, Nawea, I think was in there. Was there a third one?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think the first one's covered.
Well, the first one's covered, so I got to pick a different one.
Yeah, but we'll do that on Monday. So, and don't worry, you've got 2 weeks for the TPR group until the whole thing starts.
Okay.
Monday we'll sign up, but your task over the weekend, make sure that you understand the readings you have read so far. Let me do the count. 2 things for this week. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so the TPRS presentation thing is not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after? Is that what you said?
And it's TPR, total physical response, not TPR.
Oh, not TPRS. Oh, okay.
Okay. See, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. I do it all the time in every syllabus I ever write. It's okay. But that's what we're trying to do here is just every other week, you're going to this is kind of your work as a student. So you're just going to sort of help us lead a discussion on a particular methodology. What is it? Who made it up? Who's using it? What could it be used for? What are its limitations? Those types of things. Then we'll engage in a conversation about it. Other than that, we're reading articles, having discussions inspired by those articles. Any other questions? Thanks for your time, energy, words, thoughts. We'll see you folks on Monday. Have a great weekend. Don't forget, map out your language or languages and all the organizations that are involved in it. However you want to do it. I'm curious to see what you come up with. I'll do the same thing. See you, folks.
Oh,
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 yes.
geez, Koyanak, Deutsch.